Okay, friends, we are live this afternoon, and I'm hoping that some of you will join. Last week we were talking about the subject of purpose of life. This week we are talking about the subject of meaning, the search for meaning. As I begin this uh, subject today, let us also consider people like David. I even mentioned last week the psalm which David wrote, and he compared himself with a deer who is panting for waters, and basically is that kind of a search which is almost like unending and um, you know endless, and that's sometimes the kind of search a man can go through. Also, when we read the book of Ecclesiastes written by King Solomon, we also find a similar craving within him when he actually begins the book by saying, "Vanity of vanities, everything is vanity," and he keeps repeating this. He experiments a lot in life. He tries to find. He thinks a lot. He debates a lot. He talks about how man dies, what kind of work he leaves behind him, and those kind of things. And these are real issues of life. We grapple with similar things, and it's not just about Solomon, but we also think in those terms. And oftentimes we are capable of getting it wrong. So, as I begin, let me also share with you a humorous little story. A very rich man, wanted to send a gift to his mother, and he went to some sanctuary and he found a nice bird which could sing in many tunes and also utter many languages, and very playful kind of a bird. He bought it at an expensive price, packaged it well, sent the parcel to his mother, and then later on he wrote a note to her mother asking the next day, uh, "How did you find the bird?" Mother said, "It was very delicious." So, this is how we can misunderstand the meaning, and misunderstanding the meaning has its own consequences. So I take you to a chapter in the Bible, a few verses, and we will read those, and we will try to address this issue of meaning of life from biblical perspective. And this is in Psalm chapter 90. It's written by a man called Moses, and this is possibly the only psalm written by this awesome man. And he begins with talking to God, and he says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations." And then he says, so he's actually starting this psalm celebrating the eternality of God. God is eternal. God doesn't have an age. God does not have a beginning. God is eternal. And in verse 2, he says, "Before the mountains were born, or you gave birth to the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." I think it's a good place to start the subject of meaning of life, to explore this subject, because the one who is eternal, the one who caused everything else to begin, that's where you can find the answer of meaning. Why did he do? Why did he create this world after all? Why did he create us after all? So Moses, after talking about God's eternality, he then starts talking about how man, in 70 or 80 years, he goes to dust, he dies. And he talks about the sin of man, anger of God towards man's sin, all of that. And I'm not parking there. I'm just passing on that portion, and then I come to this verse 12 at this of this part. He says, "So teach us to number our days." Now, this is an interesting phrase. Like Moses is praying to God this prayer that God, because our life is short and because you are eternal, teach us to number our days. Right? What does it mean? And let's try to understand it. And we will read Moses a little further. But uh, how do I number my days? Like, does it mean do I wait for, like, how there are various instances when we number our days? I don't know whether you have personally done it ever or not, but maybe you can have a calendar. You are waiting for certain date, and then you are cross. Every day passes, you cross off one date. You are one day closer to that event, so you are numbering the days. An event is coming up, and you are numbering the days, right? You are aware of that upcoming event. You are like every day, you are seeing that day in relationship to that upcoming event. So that could be one way to number our days. So he's saying, look, Lord, teach us to number our days, that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So he's trying to say that this thing of numbering our days uh, will bring wisdom in my life. uh, that's amazing, that's interesting. So we must also learn to number our days, right? So then he says, in verse 14, he says, "Oh, satisfy us in the morning with your loving kindness, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days you have afflicted us." So let's see, what are those areas? One is the loving kindness of God will satisfy us. Let's talk about this. You know, man has various longings, and we all experience it. Some people in social media, you hear these terms often. Some people will say, "I'm bored," and I mean, some express it, some don't express it. uh, but this feeling of anxious boredom, uh, wanting to fill it with something unknown, wanting to be satisfied. And that's like, that's a place, that's a place, it's a good place to be in, to be very honest. It's a good place. It's a reflection of your inner search. So and we can pray that prayer like Moses. God, teach me and then satisfy me. This unsatisfied man, this human being, and this is a universal experience. All of us, at some place, in some way, in the depth of our hearts, we experience that feeling. And that feeling is, Solomon wrote it like this in Ecclesiastes. He says, God has set eternity in our heart, that we may find him. So the point is that this inner search, um, this inner need for satisfaction can be fulfilled ultimately in something which is available for us, but it can come only from God, and that is God's love. So he says, "Satisfied me with your loving kindness." It's God's love which fulfills two very important psychological needs of human beings. All of us, psychologically speaking, we have a need for security. We need to be secure. Like we I mean, people don't want to be vulnerable in relationships often. I mean, we want to be like, it feels safer to pretend. It feels safer to be artificial. It feels safer to have friends on social media, but not have a real, deep, genuine connection, because people can hurt us in relationship. So that kind of a need, um, uh, you know. But God's love is unconditional. God's love is unique. God's love is such that it can satisfy our need for security. We God's love invites every human being to come to him as he is. We can go to him as we are, and he has promised to not to take away that love from us ever, under any circumstances. So we can feel secure. We can feel secure that God will not stop loving us. God's love will not reduce for us. God will not take back his love from us. And that fulfills the need for security. But also there is a need for significance in human heart. I need to be somebody. I need to be somebody of significance. Um, and that's why we pursue careers, that's why we pursue creativity, that's why man wants to build and engineer and design and pursue arts and experience things and adventure and achieve. And all of this uh, you know fulfills a genuine human need. But we have also found out that any kind of achievements, any kind of learning, and Solomon found that out in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he reaches towards the end of the chapter, and in chapter 12, he actually starts concluding, the implications of his research. And Solomon says, while you are young, you you better get to know God. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it in my words, but and then he starts describing death, what happens towards the end of man, and how he, how man kind of starts shattering. But he says, but the good thing would be that fear God early and love God early and remember your Creator while you are young. That's what he says. And some of us may not be as young, but it's not too late also. So finding out our Creator and learning him, that love, and finding out how much he loves us, will actually satisfy the need for significance, because he has created us for a purpose. And that purpose, is found only in him. And that purpose gives the meaning to our life. Now, I long time back I read this story, and I'm going to read it back again to you. And it's an interesting story. It communicates a very important point. And this is the story of Jacob Brodsky. And he was a Russian Jew whose father owned a bookstore. And the father wanted his son to go to the college, but boy, on the other hand, only, did not want anything but to marry Leela, his childhood sweetheart. She was a French girl, vital, ambitious, and Jacob was contemplative and retiring. A couple of months after Brodsky went to college, his father fell ill and died. The son returned home, buried his father, and married his love. Then the couple moved into the apartment above the bookstore, and Brodsky took over its management. The life of books fit him perfectly, but it crammed her. She wanted more adventure, and she found it, she thought, when she met an agent who praised her beautiful singing voice and enticed her to tour Europe with a musical company. Brodsky was devastated. At their parting, he reached into his pocket and handed her the key to the front door of the bookstore. He told her, "You had better keep this because you will want it someday. Your love is not so much less than mine that you can get away from it. You will come back sometime, and I'll be waiting." She kissed him and left. To escape the pain he felt, Brodsky withdrew deep into his bookstore and took to reading as someone else might have taken to drink. He spoke little, did little, and could most times be found at the large desk near the rear of the shop, immersed in his books while he waited for his love to return. Nearly 15 years after they parted, at Christmas time, she did return. But when Brodsky rose from the reading desk that had been his place of escape for all that time, he did not take the love of his life for more than an ordinary customer. He asked, "Do you want a book?" That he didn't recognize her startled her. but she gained possession of herself and replied, I want a book, but I have forgotten the name of it. Then she told him the story of childhood sweethearts, a story of newly married couple who lived in an apartment above a bookstore, story of a young ambitious wife who left to seek a career, who enjoyed great success but could never relinquish the key her husband gave her when they parted. She told him the story she thought would bring him to himself, but his face showed no recognition. Gradually, she realized that he had lost touch with his harsh desire, that he no longer knew the purpose of his waiting and grieving, that now all he remembered was the waiting and grieving itself. You remember it, you must remember it, the story of Leela and Jacob. After a long, bewildered pause, he said, there's something familiar about the story. I think I have read it somewhere. It comes to me that it's something by Tolstoy. Dropping the key, she fled the shop, and Brodsky returned to his desk, to his reading, unaware that the love he waited for had come and gone. It's the story illustrates something. A person may be looking for something and then forget it. And this story is written in 1931 by Tennessee Williams. The title of the story is something by Tolstoy, and we can miss it. We can miss it while it is around us. God's love is like that. God's love um, is has been expressed towards us. God's love has been given to us. Right on the cross, Jesus Christ died paying for our sins. He Human beings saw him historically. We cannot deny that story as a myth. It happened. He came, claimed, he made the claims he made, and he expressed his love to this whole of human world. And he has put an invite for us, for all of us, anybody and everybody, that I love you. I've loved you with an everlasting love. That's the kind of love it is. And that love is available for us. And we cannot be like Jacob Brodowski. We cannot forget that love, but we do. And that love gives us the meaning of life. You know, there was a study conducted long time back with amongst teenagers in Sweden, and they were asked to respond to this statement. I think the following could give my life more meaning. And of those surveyed, 87% thought that the meaning could be found in a good job. 85% thought it could be found in a marriage partner. 84% thought it could be found in sports and recreation. Only 15% thought that something to do with God would help. And another 15% thought that alcohol could help. What a contradiction. About 8% consider the question of meaning of life important enough. A full 75% concluded that the question of God's existence is unimportant. You know why I bring this? Because you know, in that survey there seems to be a correlation. If I keep God question out of the meaning question, then all the answers I get are basically meaningless. A lot of us are adults, the same teenagers. I'm sure by the time they reached adulthood, they experienced it that their job could not provide the answer. I'm sure that they experienced it that the relationship, marriage, could not provide that answer. Recreation could not provide that answer. The answer is found from God. Lord, teach us to number our days. Another thing which I see with your loving kindness, he also says, make us glad according to the days you have afflicted us. and the ears we have seen evil. So there is a meaning to be found in suffering. This is amazing. And we all wish it would not happen to us. We all wish it. We are going through a tremendous time all around us. COVID 19 has shaken um, most of us, I would say, and it has changed the world. We have lost a lot of people. We have lost people whom we have known. Suffering is a reality. In this world, there is suffering. But what Moses is praying is that there is a way in which suffering provides us with that element of teaching us to number our days. Suffering builds character. Suffering draws us closer to God. Suffering makes us more real. It's amazing that suffering has a meaning. We will talk about this subject at another time, because this is an important subject. But for the moment, it suffices to say that when we suffer, it is important for us to go to God, not only to find the antidote to our suffering, but also to understand our suffering, to understand the reasons for our suffering, and also to understand um, the learnings from our suffering, to understand the meaning of our suffering, to understand what God is doing inside us through that suffering. That's amazing. And then it says, let your work appear to your servants and your majesty to their children. So, so I want also us to understand that there is a potential of finding the meaning in our circumstances, in our daily life, in our provisions, in our blessings. God is around us on a daily basis. None of our days are a waste. Every day you spend on this earth has a potential for eternity. Jesus, when he was teaching his disciples, oftentimes, even in his great Sermon on the Mount, Jesus spoke things like, where your heart is, where your treasure is, your heart is. Invest your treasures in heaven, in eternity. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all food and clothes and everything else will be added unto you. So Jesus encouraged a lifestyle like that. And you know there is a meaning. I don't know, whoever you are, it doesn't matter. Like, you, sometimes we have a tendency to think only those people are serving God who have some kind of a religious uh, role to play. But actually, it's not so. God is present in every normal day, in every normal life. In fact, there are no normal lives. E- every life is exceptional. Every life is unique. Every day of you in Psalm 139 is written in God's book. Every God thinks about your days and your life with a purpose. You are here on the face of this earth with an eternal meaning, and only your creator can reveal it to you. And that's amazing thing. So, and then the last phrase Moses uses here, let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and confirm for us the work of our hands. Yes, confirm the work of our hands. So which basically tells that Every human being has a calling. You have a calling. You god has god has designed you with special gifts and abilities. Your circumstances, your blessings, your struggles, they are like your fingerprints. They are unique. uh, they are in the hands of God, and God can give us perspective about all of those. God can teach us to exercise those gifts and talents for the purpose for which they have been given to us. And God can help us discover those and live according to that and satisfy us. And it's amazing. Today, I'm closing, but today I heard one preacher and I saw him illustrate something. In my hand, I have this. Let's say this is a rope. Okay, this is some item from my wife's sewing kit, but for the moment this is a rope. And imagine that the other end of this rope is endless. It never ends. It doesn't end. And this is how eternity is. Eternity is endless, but we are living a life on the earth. It's a life on the earth, and the life on the earth is like this part. You see a green part of the rope. This is the part. While our life, even after death, it goes on, and it never ends. It's eternal. We are eternal beings, and this will never end. But we are here. We don't see all that, and we live here. We live in this tiny part. And that's why Moses is saying, God, I have these 70, 80 years. You are eternal, and eternity is like this. But I'm living, Lord, in this, and I'm focused on this, and I'm like, all of us, we basically, all we have in mind mostly is this part of the life, these 70 years, and we want to live for this. But what God is teaching us is, this is so much connected with this. Your life here, actually, like these little years, these few number of years, he says it's almost like morning it begins and evening it ends, something like that. But that short a life has a value for all of the eternity. It will impact all of our eternity. And this is amazing, that we can live here in this small portion but build the whole eternity. And this is amazing. This is an opportunity. That's what makes this life meaningful. That's what makes this life meaningful, because how I live here will impact all of my eternity. My friends, last week I read a quote to you from C.S. Lewis. You have never faced an insignificant being. Human beings are very significant because they are eternal. There are only two destinations. Heaven means an eternal pleasure, eternal existence in the presence of God, and hell means an eternal denial from the presence of God. And that's so difficult thing to even think about. Going to heaven is so easy. Jesus has given us invite. He has said, whoever believes in me, whoever receives the forgiveness of sins by grace through faith, he will be forgiven. Everyone can go to heaven for all of eternity. But my friends, today I am not even just encouraging you to make the decision of getting saved and going to heaven. I'm asking you, I'm inviting you based on the Bible, that get to know God, trust Him, and live a meaningful life. Get that understanding of the meaning of your blessings, and your gifts, and your sufferings, and your normal day, and your circumstances, and your longings. All of it is meaningful, and God can show you the meaning on a daily basis, and we can pray like Moses every day. God, teach me to number my days. Teach me to understand the meaning of what's going on around me, to understand the meaning of what is going on inside me. That's amazing. That's wonderful. That's all for today, friends. Next week. Thanks, Pradeep. Thanks for your comments. I love it every week. I appreciate you watching this, and I hope this is. I'm not trying to keep it dramatic and too prepared. I'm trying to have a normal discourse, um, uh, as if we were sitting in front of each other. So I want this to be informal. I want our audience to understand that you are hearing from a real a person like you. I'm no religious leader or a guru or anybody, but I'm just a Bible reader. I believe in God, and I'm trying to impart these deep things which can help all of us decode the spiritual things. Next week, we talk about the universe. Until then, thanks, Robin. Thanks for being here. Have a great week ahead. God bless you. Take care.